Welcome back, boxing fans, to the great show with Sean on boxing. I think it's funny when so-called boxing fans try to disprove something, but really just embarrass themselves in the process. Looking at the consensus pound for pound list, especially the top five primarily, right? If you look at the top five pound for pound fighters in boxing today, you cannot find anyone else that deserves to be in that top five above those five fighters. It's impossible because all five of these guys have earned it, right? You can talk about how this version of the pound for pound modern version is watered down compared to the old days. Well, that ain't fucking true. Boxing in the old days was watered down compared to today because before you did not have boxing globally like it is now. Of course, dummies that fucking don't know the sport, don't know the history, they don't understand that. When it was primarily an American-based sport, you did not have all the athletes from around the world. The global amount of boxers that you have today, literally, you can go ask AI specifically to find out how many professional boxers there are today in 2025 and compare that to 1925. And you will see it ain't even fucking close. You know how you can tell it was also watered down back in the day? Because there was such a limited amount of fighters, primarily top fighters, usually fought each other 5 to 7 times in their careers. Like, a trilogy was normal. These dudes were fighting 5, 6, 7 times in their lifetime, not just 3 times, right? Because they didn't have other opponents available to them. That ain't the case today. Today, there's a shitload of fighters out there. Obviously, there's different levels, but I mean, there's still so much competition today compared to before. And this just is common sense. Right now, there's over 7 billion people in the world, whereas back then, there was, 2 billion. So the world is so much bigger now that obviously the amount of people that participate in activities, sports, is far larger today than it is before. But we know why these kind of people are crying about the pound for pound list. Because these guys want you to feel that whoever they feel belongs in the pound for pound list, that's the real truth, right? But yet these guys are only using racial politics. They're just putting guys on the pound for pound list based on looking like them, not based on actual achievements and accomplishments, but because they look the same. Yet these guys want to criticize everybody else's pound for pound list, which is based on hard facts, data, right? Things that everybody can quantify. The amount of champions you fought, the amount of titles you won, the amount of weight classes you've been through. These things are quantifiable. Everybody can do their research and find out the exact same information. There's no fanboyingism. There's no favoritism. There's no, popularity contests. When you talk about the top 5 fighters in boxing today, if you don't have Usyk, Anui, Bivol, Crawford, and then Beterbiev as your top 5 fighters in boxing today, there's a real fucking problem with you as a boxing fan. You're really the individual. Obviously, Beterbiev is coming off of a loss, so potentially you could have maybe Canelo or maybe Bam Rodriguez or potentially some other guy in the bottom 5 potentially surpass him. But above and beyond that, I mean, justifiably, he deserves to be on that list based on the great resume and the great things he's achieved recently. And even his most recent loss to Bivol was also a very close, controversial fight. Many people feel that Beterbiev won that fight. I didn't. I felt Bivol won that fight and deserved the victory. But I also feel that Beterbiev won the first fight and deserved that victory. That's why we're having a trilogy. But the irony is, the reason this kind of individual is upset, it's not because of who's on the top 5 pound for pound list. It's the fact that some people don't put the black American guy at number 1. And this is the whole premise for his upset nature, for his disdain, for his moaning and groaning and trying to compare modern pound for pound lists to say Sugar Ray Robinson's pound for pound list, literally in 1930, 1940. And I can tell you, the pound for pound list today is way better than it was then. It ain't even fucking comparable. How could it be? The competition back then, very limited. Very limited. Not like today. We look at the guys right now in the top 5 pound for pound list, and fine, you can put whoever you want at number 1, because this is how credible these fighters are. The fact that somebody is using racial politics, and this is the whole thing they're trying to push because somebody else disagrees with their take, right? Because heaven forbid you have a different opinion, right? These dudes are fucking mental, right? If you don't agree with them, you're racist. But they don't have to agree with you, and they're just giving an opinion. See, this is a problem with stupid motherfuckers. This is like people that are pro-Palestine and anti-Israel, but yet don't know fucking anything about the reality of the situation, right? Think this is like a new issue that's only been happening for like a year, right? Ignorant, stupid, don't know shit. So how can you take anything they say as fact? Let's look at the top guys on the list, and this is in no order. So I'll put Crawford number 1 because I know this is what this is all about. Crawford being number 1, right? Crawford currently is a 4-weight world champion, 2-weight undisputed. I think he's beaten 11 world champions in his career, right? Not bad, pretty significant. You think about Usyk. Usyk is also a 2-weight world champion, undisputed in those 2 weight classes. His recent resume is unbelievable, far better than Bud Crawford. Like, you cannot compare what Usyk has been doing in the last 3 years to what Crawford has been doing in the last 3 years, because it's not comparable, right? The guys that Usyk has been beating are elite fighters, and he didn't just beat one elite fighter, he beat several elite fighters. And you know, the difference between him fighting guys and what, say, a Crawford or a Bivol or a Nui are doing is literally he's giving up 50 pounds in weight, right? And it's ironic because we know if he was a black American, the amount of praise he'd be getting would be unbelievable. Unbelievable. It's kind of like when Roy Jones became a heavyweight champion. He didn't even beat the best heavyweight, but the amount of praise he got, which elevated him and justified him as pound for pound number 1 fighter in boxing at that time, because what he did, people could not fathom anybody doing up until the point where he did that. Well, it's equivalent to what Usyk is doing. Beating Fury, a guy who is 6'9", had a 6, 7, 8-inch reach advantage over him, came in 50 pounds bigger than him, yet he beat him. Not once, but twice. But somehow that pales into comparison to Bud Crawford fighting once in 3 years against a world champion who had a record of like 10-1. And I'm not hating on Crawford, because obviously before that he's done a lot of great things. Obviously he beat Spence prior to that victory over Madrimov, which is inevitably the best win on Bud Crawford's resume. But you can see both of these guys very credible. Both have accomplished a lot. So regardless of who you want to put into the number 1 spot, is it really negative? It's only a big thing if you're just infatuated with racial politics. If you don't give a shit about that and you only talk about boxing, you'll hear my opinion right now and you'll be like, yeah, that's true. I totally agree with it. I get what he's saying, right? And then you think about Inoue, who is also a 4-weight world champion like Crawford, also a 2-weight undisputed champion like Crawford and Usyk, right? This is a guy who has been the most active champion in boxing today for the last few years, fighting 3 or 4 times every year, right? People are critical of the people he's beaten because they can't accept a non-black fighter getting a lot of credit. So that's the basis of their criticism. If he was a black American, of course, he'd be getting far more attention than he's getting now. But because he's not, the only thing he gets is criticism. This is a guy who's a superstar in Japan. Just did 60,000 fighting a 2-weight world champion in Luis Neri in a great fight. He got dropped, got up, stopped Neri in an exciting fight. Totally gave the fans everything they wanted in that fight, right? And sold 60,000 tickets to watch that live venue, right? Something American fighters today aren't doing. Nobody's doing that, not even heavyweights. Then you think about Bivol. Bivol, who's beaten Canelo Alvarez, who was considered the pound-for-pound #1 fighter in boxing by most people at that time. Of course, for people who are racially political, they couldn't justify Canelo being above Bud Crawford, even though he was a 4-weight world champion. Bud was a 3-weight world champion. He was undisputed. Bud was also undisputed, right? And at that time, Bud wasn't undisputed in 2 weight divisions, only 1. So him and Canelo actually were both undisputed in 1 division, but Canelo actually had 1 weight division of more that he won titles in, and has a way better resume, right? I think he has 19 world champions he's beaten compared to Bud Crawford's 11. I'm just going off the top of my head, so if I'm off by a few, forgive me. But you can understand why Canelo at that time was considered pound-for-pound #1, right? He'd become an undisputed champion in like less than 1 year. What he did was incredible, something that we don't see most fighters doing. So because of that, he got a lot of credit and was pound-for-pound #1. Bivol beat him when he was considered the best fighter in the world, when him fighting cruiserweight world champions was seen as a cherry pick, right? Maybe you forget, but that was real. Bivol went in there, put on a masterclass, beat him. Then defended his title by beating Zerto, who was an undefeated 168-pound champion who was moving up to try to become a 2-weight world champion by beating Bivol. Bivol put a masterclass on, beating that guy and sending his ass straight up to cruiserweight, where he went on to become a 2-belt unified champion in the cruiserweight division. Just showing you how significant of a victory that was for Bivol. And then he went on to beat Better BF, an undisputed, undefeated champion with a 100% KO ratio, up until, of course, he beat Bivol to become undisputed. Prior to that, he was 100% KO ratio, obviously beat Bivol, but wasn't able to knock him out. Bivol was able to come back in the rematch, beat this monster to become an undisputed champion, with 3 of the best wins you can say out of anybody in boxing today, right? These are the top 4 fighters in boxing today, but yet you're going to talk about how pound for pound is watered down. Watered down. Like, you can't make this shit up. It's ridiculous. And then you got Better BF, who I just talked about, who had a 100% KO ratio, was a 3-belt unified light heavyweight champion, fought an undefeated fighter who had beaten these 2 other great fighters prior to stepping in the ring with him, was much older, ended up beating him to become undisputed. Lost the second fight, but a very competitive fight, very close. Some people think it was disputable. Up to you, your opinion. All I know is it was a close fight, but I feel Bivol won, and it's going to be interesting to see how the third fight plays out. At this point, I favor Bivol. He's the younger man. I definitely think stylistically he's learnt what he needs to do to beat Better BF. Better BF at 40 years old, it's a big ask for him to try to beat the slick fighter in Bivol, but we will see. I'm a big fan of his, so I'm hoping he does win. But you look at these 5 fighters and you tell me, how is this a watered down weight division? Is it just because there's only 1 black American fighter in the top 5? I mean, Jesus Christ, you got 2 Russians, you got a Japanese fighter, you got a Ukrainian, and a black American. And then underneath of that, you have 2 more Japanese fighters, right? Mexican American, and on my list, another black American. So the list is excellent. It's got great diversity, and the guys that are literally champions are great. Let's even look at the bottom 5, right? The guys I have. So then you get to Bam Rodriguez. Bam Rodriguez obviously is a 2-weight world champion, unified at 1 weight, is attempting to become unified in his 2nd division in his next fight. And he's still very young, 26 years of age, right? Fought a lot of really credible opponents, and the best ones were his best performances. His performance against Estrada was fucking unbelievable. A masterclass, a really great performance. Then you got Junta Nakatani. Junta Nakatani is literally a 3-weight world champion. He's a unified bantamweight champion right now. And this is a guy that's chasing an Inui undisputed unification fight for his 4th weight division in early 2026. I mean, how can you be critical of a guy taking on that level of opposition? And he's the youngest fighter on the pound for pound list. I think he's, well, he might not be the youngest. It's either him or Bam, but they're both fairly young compared to the rest of the pound for pound list, right? Then you get Kenshiro Teraji. Kenshiro Teraji is also a 2-weight world champion. He's been unified in both divisions. He had 3 belts in one, was ducked for undisputed, and now currently he's 2-belt unified champion in his 2nd division, right? Has a great resume. I think he's beaten 12 or 13 world champions in his career so far at this point of his career, right? And he's taking on all comers and big challenges. So obviously he's done a lot. Because you don't know him or you haven't watched his fight, that talks about your ignorance. It doesn't talk about him, because he's done everything he needed to do to prove himself to people that actually follow the sport of boxing, right? So that's the top 8 right there, right? It's pretty significant. Bam, Junto, Kenshiro Teraji. Then, of course, I have Tank Davis on my list. Some people disagree, but I think the fashion that Tank Davis has been going about beating guys has been pretty impressive. Tank Davis is a 1-weight really world champion. Obviously, he's just been elevated to a 2-weight world champion, but he didn't beat anyone to get that title, but okay. So he's a 2-weight world champion. Really, the hurdle for him is that now that he's a 2-weight world champion, he's failed to unify titles in either weight division. So he's never fought another world champion to unify fights. You look at everyone else I've just mentioned, they've all unified titles. Literally everybody. There's nobody in the top 8 above him who hasn't unified titles. But yet this pound for pound list is watered down. Watered down. You think about a lot of the people that were on pound for pound lists before, they were not nearly as not as accomplished as guys that are literally on the list now. These guys literally are doing everything to prove themselves. They're not just cherry picking opponents for the most part. People blame Tank Davis. They think he was cherry picking as a PBC fighter, and that is generally a PBC type of thing. And this is a shout out to Drunk Irishman, that at number 10, I'm putting Zurdo Ramirez. Zurdo Ramirez, who's currently a 2-weight world champion and a unified cruiserweight champion. Just had a fantastic performance this past weekend, beating a 2-time cruiserweight champion in Dorticus, and really putting on a masterclass. Fought brilliantly against him and really showed you why people are very eager to see him either against a guy like David Benavidez or to unify titles versus Jai Opataya, right? Which obviously would be a incredible fight in the cruiserweight division. One of the best fights in boxing today, and it's in the cruiserweight division. So all the more reason to do it, because the cruiserweight division historically hasn't got as much attention as some of the other divisions. So there you are. It's a very well-rounded list of people who are literally proven. The only guy who's not unified is Tank Davis. So in that case, I'd probably be better to put Shakur Stevenson on the list above him, except I feel he's been more dominant than Shakur Stevenson, right? So it would be hard for me to justify Shakur being on the list over Tank Davis at this point. But many people feel Tank doesn't belong on the list, and it is what it is. But you tell me, who belongs on this list that I haven't listed? How is this list watered down? Who deserves to be on this list, this watered down list, right? This list that was only created because people are fanboys, and this is like a popularity contest. Where's the popularity contest? Like, the popularity contest comes when you're literally trying to jam somebody into the number 1 position, and it's such an issue with you. Number 2 is not good enough. Top 3, oh no, that's disrespectful. That's how ignorant these people are, because it can only be the Black American. even though he's been the most inactive out of all the fighters. He hasn't been doing the most in probably the last 2 or 3 years, right? They feel this is like a historical fucking list, but it's not a historical list. Pound for pound is not historical. Obviously, that's a component, but also your activity, what you're doing recently, is significant, because you could be a great fighter with a great history, but at this point, you could be old, shot, and garbage. And if that's the case, how would somebody put you pound for pound number one? It would be embarrassing when you get beat by a mediocre fucking contender that nobody even talks about, and say, oh, you're pound for pound number one, but you got beat by a guy with 6 losses, right? That's why you can't do it that way. But unfortunately, some people are so fixated on racial politics, you can't have a normal conversation. You tell me who deserves to be on this watered down list.